Hello and welcome to this 298th episode of California Dreaming. And if all goes well, this should get published today, the same day that I dropped the audio interrogation tapes episode on Teresa Stone. Before we get started, I have a few notes about the show. This is an independent ad-free podcast, which means I depend on you, the listeners, to help keep the show going. And there are a number of ways that you can help. You can start by leaving a nice rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you listen to your shows on. You can recommend us in true crime discussion groups and forums. You can also follow the show on Facebook, like the page, join the group, etc., etc. I'm also on X and Instagram and sometimes TikTok. And if you'd like to go above and beyond and have $1 or $2 to spare, you can become a Patreon subscriber. Starting at just $1 a month, you will be able to access dozens of episodes that you will not hear anywhere else. It is a pretty good deal. Every subscriber gets to listen, and the price has not gone up in 7.5 years. But if a subscription just isn't your thing, and you'd still like to make a contribution to the production of this podcast, you can do so through PayPal using my email, californiapod@gmail.com. So for now, I owe some belated thank yous to Abby P., James C., Logan M. in Arizona, Jane G., yet again, Gina in Anaheim, California, Bo M. in Australia, Lori P., Donna B. in Amityville, New York, Christine F. in Fremont, California, Bianca C., Kate H. in the UK, Heather H., Hey Girl in San Pedro, California, Jennifer, and there are lots of Jennifers out there, but you opted out of receiving mail, so I don't know your last initial or your location, but you did join at the end of April of this year. And last but not least, it's either Kelly M. or Morgan K. I don't know for sure, but I do know you're in Texas. If you want to email me to clear things up, I'm not sure because you kind of have two first names. I want to thank you all for either joining Patreon, raising your pledge, going annual, or donating through PayPal. All right, that's all I've got for the intro. Let's get started with our analysis of the interrogation that you may have listened to in episode 297. This is our series on how not to become the wife of a pastor, the interrogation of Teresa Stone. So I got the audio clips from a 3-hour-long YouTube video. I think I told you that in the last part, but some of you may not want to listen to that. You might just want to listen to the discussion. So this might sound a little redundant for now. I got it from a YouTube video that was 3 hours long, and the person who put this together handpicked some highlights of what was originally about 10 hours of Teresa's interrogation, 3 separate interviews compiled together, came to almost, well, it was like 10.5 hours. I'm not only going to talk about what you heard in the previous episode, but you will also hear everything in between. I'm going to fill in all the gaps of what was omitted in the 10 hours. So you're going to know at the end of the series just about everything that was said, every detail, every lie, everything. You just won't actually hear all of it in the audio clips. This is going to be a pretty substantial listen, but you know that this is what the show is all about. I'm trying to put you to sleep every night, but with the sound and tone and screechiness of Teresa's voice, I'm pretty sure that won't be the case for episode 297. She gets annoying after a while. So if you choose to skip it, you can just start here and get every single detail of her entire interrogation without having to put up with her. But to me, Teresa Stone is so amazingly and obviously devious and evil. I just find so much humor and entertainment in the things that she has to say. And I just can't help myself. So, without further ado, let's talk about how not to become the wife of a pastor, but you tried anyway, had your husband murdered, and now you're trying to wiggle your way out of going to prison for the rest of your life. Teresa Stone is that gift that keeps on giving. The first clip that you heard, if you listened to the audio, was Teresa's interview the same afternoon of Randy Stone's murder. After she walked into the insurance office and found Randy, remember, Teresa stepped over his body, put her work phone headset on, called her parents and told them that Randy had been shot, and asked them to come down to the office. 9 minutes later, I don't remember, I think it was 9 minutes or 6 minutes, I can't recall, but either one of those numbers of minutes was when she decided to make the 911 call. It was way too long for her to wait to make that next phone call. And this would become the first weird thing, one of the first weird things that Teresa did that made people do a double take. And what she also did, instead of using the same phone that she called her parents on to call 911, or hey, even using that phone to call 911 first would have been, the thing that she should have done, I think anyway. But the next bizarre thing that she did was that she stepped over Randy's body again. She grabbed her purse and her cell phone and made a call to 911 and then ran outside and started her performance. But when she called 911, she did not tell the dispatcher that Randy was shot. She made it sound like he was having some kind of unspecified medical emergency. She said she didn't know what was wrong with him. Maybe he fell and that there was blood coming from his ear. Maybe it was caused by a head injury. That was wrong, but she definitely did not say that he had been shot on the 911 call. Mainly because she knew that she wasn't supposed to have that knowledge. However, Teresa forgot that detail when she called her parents first. She knew her parents would eventually know that Randy died from a gunshot wound. They just should not have known before first responders, and neither should have Teresa. She told her parents when she called them that Randy had been shot. She hung up 9 minutes later, called 911, and said that something's wrong with her husband. It was a huge, huge mistake from minute one. So in the first section of the audio clips that you may have heard, the detectives speaking to Teresa are being pretty sympathetic to her there. She's newly widowed, of course. Although she tries in the beginning to sound very sad and meek and demure, her true self will soon emerge, and she will be able to carry on a normal conversation with these detectives as if nothing life-changing just took place. The way that Teresa sounded in this very first interview is the only time that she will sound like that for the next 9 hours. Towards the end, it'll start to calm down a little bit. So for the rest of the hours and hours of interviews and interrogations, Teresa will talk in her normal conversational tone unless she's getting upset. It's a normal cadence, just shooting the breeze with these detectives. And then when they get to some of the more serious details about finding Randy's body, some of the more gruesome things of that sort, Teresa will turn on the emotions. Then when the conversation goes back to like her schedule that day, where she went, what she did, she slips right back into her normal everyday speak. This first section is really all about getting some background information on Teresa, Randy, their family, their marriage, their life together, just general information. But that doesn't mean that Teresa is being truthful. Make no mistake. Even when talking about family life, she's a liar. So Teresa says that when they first got married, she and Randy fought more because he was in the military, and it put a strain on their relationship since he was deployed. This was actually in response to whether or not she and Randy ever had any marital problems or periods of separation. She brought up being separated during his deployment, but other than that, no, they were never separated, as in we were on a break type of thing. But Teresa will end her answer by saying, but no, we were very much in love. What a frickin' joke, knowing where this conversation is eventually going to go. So, yeah, the first thing that Teresa has to say, one of the first things that she has to say, is that her and Randy were very much in love. Keep that in mind for the next few hours. After that, the detective will start talking to Teresa about her daily schedule. And this is the section of questioning where Teresa begins to go into all sorts of minutiae and minute details about her day. She's asked to start from the beginning of the day and what time the insurance office that her and her husband own, what time it opens, and she replied, if you want to know, here's my schedule. Now, the reason I'm going to tell you what she says almost verbatim a lot of the times is because it's very telling of how much thinking and stalling that this woman needs to do. She's very repetitive, and you're going to catch on to that. And I didn't want to leave that out because I think it's really important when you're trying to analyze the truthfulness of what somebody's saying. Okay, so she says, if you want to know, here's my schedule. So she's very matter of fact, just normal everyday conversation. Never mind that just 2 hours ago, she just found her dead husband. Teresa basically gives a minute by minute, play by play of what she and Randy did that morning. She states, I get in the office at 7:45 every day. The office doesn't open till 9, but I always open the blinds. I answer phone calls at 8 o'clock or whenever they start ringing. I answer the phone. That's just us. We don't let it go to voicemail. We just don't do that. She then talked about the one person who came in slightly after 8 a.m. The door was still locked, she said, because she keeps it locked until 9 a.m. And this is when she lets off her first bit of laughter. Remember, I just told you, this interview was recorded 2 hours after she found Randy dead. And she laughed when she says that she unlocks the door when she knows Randy is about to come in, but even then sometimes she forgets and she finds Randy knocking at the door and it's like, oh crap, I left the door locked. Insert inappropriate laughter in the wake of husband's violent murder. Ha ha. She laughs again a few seconds later when she says something along the lines of Randy wanting her to keep the doors locked when she's there by herself because she knows all of their clients, and if she doesn't know them, then she doesn't open the door because she wants to be safe, because she's scared. And you're going to find out this woman is basically afraid of everything. And when you see her demeanor with these detectives, you're going to be like, this woman is not afraid of anything. I don't know why it bothered me so much when she said it was Randy who worries and wants her to keep the door locked if she's at the office alone. Because it's like, why can't she just say that she worries about her personal safety when Randy's not there, so she keeps the door locked? I think it's because she's trying to throw in as many details as she possibly can to make it appear that her and Randy had a close, loving, caring relationship. And in order to do so, she puts the responsibility of her personal safety and well-being in Randy's hands. He's the one that cares for her. He's the one that's the protector. He's the one that worries for her because they're so very much in love, as she puts it. And it's a detail that is totally useless and unnecessary to the investigation. And that's why she's throwing it in there, because she's going to do that. She's going to try to direct this conversation in every direction she possibly can, other than the matter at hand. What difference does it make to solving Randy's murder that he's so concerned for her safety all the time? The irony in that, right? He's the one who's always so worried that something is going to happen to his wife, yet he's the one that ends up shot to death in that very office where he so much wanted Teresa to be safe. It's just Teresa, what she's doing here, she's building up as many details as she can around her own narrative right now, because later on, she is going to get super vague. So she's going to be specific about things that are irrelevant and vague about things that are really important. And I bet you anything that everyone listening to this, all of us, men, women, and otherwise, all of us want us to lock our doors to be safe. I don't lock my door when I'm home alone because the person that I'm with makes me do it for my own personal safety. I lived here in this apartment by myself for 4 years before he came along, and I guarantee you, I lock the door every single day and every single night on my own for myself and for my dogs, of course. In fact, having someone else around in the evenings now, I feel like I've gotten a little complacent. I can feel myself not worrying as much since I have more backup than a couple of geriatric pug mixes. But anyway, like I said, I just think Teresa is trying to build up her relation. And I'm not saying that the person that I'm with doesn't give a shit about my safety. It's just I give a shit about my safety and I'm the one that locks the door. And nobody needs to tell me that. Nobody needs to care about me for me. I care, okay? Plain and simple. And I don't know why she can't just say that. Never mind, I do know why. It's because, like I said, she's trying to build up her relationship with Randy in order to make it seem like the two of them had absolutely no marital discord whatsoever, which we all know by now could not be further from the truth. Teresa will continue going into unnecessarily specific details about what Randy normally does and all of the little things that he did all morning long, on this day and basically every day. Another thing about Teresa and Randy is she frames it that they're always in constant communication. And I guess if you're going to set your husband up to be shot to death, then you might want to keep close tabs on him until the deed is done. She knew when he went to go jogging, when he worked out, when he showered. He calls to tell her, I'm going into the shower. He called a couple times that morning to say he was going to the tanning salon. And tanning is going to be a big issue for me in the series, trust me. Teresa knew every single little thing about Randy's day, the day he would die. So for her to try to claim that she knew nothing about, what she's going to do is she's going to claim that she knows nothing about Randy's firearms. She's going to claim that she knew nothing about Randy owning a Glock. It's going to come up soon. It's absolute garbage. She was able to tell the detective how many times they talked on the phone that morning. She knew which call was made to landlines. She knew which calls were made to cell phones. She knew every single little thing that Randy did that morning. She was even able to recount the calls that she made to Randy that he didn't pick up. She recalled the reasons why he didn't pick up. And she recalled when he called back and that he explained to her why he didn't pick up. But yet she had no idea that he owned a Glock. That's her first story. Teresa will next go into all this minutia about a client of theirs from church who wanted to cancel their insurance policy. And they go to church with them and they're good friends of theirs and they wanted to talk to Randy. So she gave them his cell phone number and she was calling him to let him know about it. And he was calling her back to tell her the details about these clients. That whole thing wasn't a big deal, but by this point, she's talking in the same manner, tone, and cadence that I kind of do on this podcast. It's very detailed, it's very sidetracky, it's upbeat. She's so engaged in this conversation. And unlike a lot of interrogations, the sound quality is kind of terrible and choppy. It's not the case for this. It's very easy to understand Teresa in these recordings because she's not freaking out about her husband being murdered at all. And I keep thinking about that when I listen to her talking to this detective about her day. Like, dude, your husband just got murdered and you're just talking about whatever like it's nothing. It's crazy to me. Teresa said that Randy called her around 9:30 and that he was going to go tan. And in a span of 7 seconds, she says the word tan 3 times. And I watch the behavior panel on YouTube. Probably a lot of you guys watch that too. Those 4 guys that talk about body language. I see that on the behavior panel when someone is being overly detailed, overly repetitive, and things like that, it can be indicative of deception. The guys on the behavior panel call it detail mountains and detail valleys. Guilty people will give you a mountain of details around irrelevant things, but when it comes to the most important event, in this case, the murder of her husband, we suddenly get detail valleys, where the suspect becomes quite vague and sparse and brings hardly any details at all. That is exactly what Teresa does here. I'm sorry, my voice is starting to go a little bit hoarse, but I'm going to try to get to 2 hours on this. I got 20 minutes in, so hopefully we make it. As I was saying, the suspect will get vague and sparse with details around the crime. And that's exactly what Teresa will do here. When she says the word tan 3 times in 7 seconds, she's giving too much information. I counted it. She states, this is what she says. He said I was going to go tan because we were getting ready to go to Florida to see my son. So he was going to go tan because they opened at 9 o'clock. So he was going to go around 9:30 to go tan. And she's talking so fast at this point. That's how she fit all of that in 7 seconds. It's also during this portion of this conversation that Teresa says that Randy called her back to let her know that he was done. She said that they called each other all the time to let each other know what they're doing. I guess that's normal. I don't know what normal is when it comes to relationship. I had 0 faith and 0 trust in my marriage. So keeping up with someone who is a garbage human being, it's like there's no point to that because nothing they tell you is the truth. It's crazy making. Things now, the way that I handle communicating, moving on, and moving forward are so different than when I was married. With the person that I met earlier this year, we're not connected on any social media except for Instagram, and that's my podcast stuff, not my personal stuff. And for him, it's his car stuff, and that's it. We're not on Facebook. We don't have to claim each other on social media to let the world know. It's just not necessary for me. Maybe some people like that stuff. I had that with my ex-husband, and it was just a clusterfuck of problems. So anyway, when Teresa said that Randy and she called each other all the time to let each other know what they're doing, to me, it sounds exhausting and miserable. But I think Teresa, again, is trying to build up her relationship with Randy into being more than it actually was. Teresa didn't love Randy. She hated him, literally hated him to death. Next, Teresa went into more details about the customer that had come in, and it was shortly after that that Randy came into work. She said Randy came into her office and they talked about business stuff, what her day was going to be like the following day. She was taking some training to become an insurance agent too, I believe. They were going to open their own business and cut ties with farmers. And a little while later, she said around 12:30 that Randy left to go get something to eat. She stated, he left and we got something to eat about 12:30. He got back a little bit after 12:30 and we ate. He had gone to McDonald's. I mentioned that in the last episode that I suspected that this was the time that she may have slipped the Glock out of Randy's possession and replaced it with that smaller gun in wherever Randy kept his weapons in the office. But anyway, Teresa had detailed diarrhea when she talked about the McDonald's, which one he went to, what street it was on, when they ate, when he came back, all this stuff. Just too many details. Teresa said that when Randy got back, they ate at her desk. They called their son Michael from her cell phone so that they could talk to him together. They had plans to travel to Florida by car the following week to visit their son's girlfriend's parents, first in Kentucky and then to Florida. Teresa said that they were good friends of theirs and they were all going to drive down for a visit. After they ate lunch, Teresa said that nobody else came into the office and she left at 1:30. She was quite specific, way too specific and perky for someone whose husband just got murdered, but okay. So from there, over the next few minutes, there's going to be a volley of question and answers. What I'm going to do right here, and I'm not going to do this very often, I'm only going to tell you what Teresa says because the detective is going to ask for more details, but I kind of want to just go down the list of the things that Teresa has to say, just so you can later on compare the kind of details that she has when it comes time to talk about Randy's murder. Over the next couple of minutes in the audio, when Teresa gets to the part where she leaves for the afternoon, the window of opportunity to murder Randy has officially opened. After she talked about the trip to Florida, Teresa will say, "No one came into the office. I left at 1:30. I went to US Bank. Yes, just right down the street from our office. I went to the chiropractor, Michael Pardun. His wife even called me. I was supposed to be there at 1:45 to fill out paperwork, and my appointment was actually at 2, but the bank was kind of slow, so I didn't get there till about 10 till. Insert awkward giggling. But I called and told them, we've gone to that chiropractor several times, about a year and a half almost. I just made a deposit, just our monthly deposit. My appointment was at 2. I got there at 10 till. I left there about 2:15, so I had about an hour to spare. So I went shopping at Dress Barn. Insert awkward giggling. I went to the Dress Barn because it's right down the street from Tri-City, so I wanted to be close so I wouldn't run short of time. So I left Dress Barn about 2:41. And dreamers, this is outrageously specific, this time that she gave. It's the first thing that made me realize just how closely this woman was looking at the time. She's not just waiting to pick up Miranda from school, but she's also waiting for the murder to get done and for her husband to get dead. But I will say this in defense of this suspiciously specific timestamp that Teresa put on her afternoon errand schedule. The person that I'm with, it sounds weird to say my boyfriend, but I guess that's what it is. My boyfriend has a 5-year-old, and when I go to pick him up from school, I've timed it where I'll leave my place at 1:58 in order to get to the school around 2:05 or 2:06, and then I'll leave my car at 2:09 to pick him up at the gate at 2:11. Those would be the times that I would have to admit that if I were questioned by police about a murder, I'd have very, very specific minutes, down to the minute. However, the difference between my scenario and Teresa's scenario is that I leave from my home to go to the school, which would be a regular routine. She's leaving from the Dress Barn, a place that she normally doesn't leave from, to go pick her daughter up from school. And I've figured out the best times that work for me to go and pick up the kid from school. So yeah, I understand that the timing and picking up kids from school gets specific once you figure it out. There's just a sweet spot that you fall into where you're not too early and you're not too late. And especially here in southern Nevada, in the Vegas area, school starts, it's still 115 degrees every day until mid-October, late October. So you don't want to be sitting in your car or standing outside waiting for your kid. It's hot. But that's why you got to get there in good time. But anyway, I digress. So I left the Dress Barn at 2:41, and I just ran on up to Tri-City and just sat in the parking lot and waited for Miranda to get out of school. She gets out at 3:15. That's when I tried to call Randy 6 times. And right here, dreamers, Teresa gets oddly quiet for a moment and will suddenly, because you start, when she says, that's when I tried to call Randy 6 times, and you're thinking, oh, this is a buildup to something. No. She will suddenly blurt out, but he called me back at 3:08. I did. I talked to him at 3:08. And that's not unusual because he's very busy and on the phone. He doesn't like to interrupt his business. So no, I didn't call him when I was at the dress barn. I didn't talk to anybody when I was at the dress barn. I just called him I called him when I was on my way to school. Teresa was then asked if she purchased anything at the dress barn, and she quickly replied, "No, I did not. No." She denied buying anything at the dress barn 3 times. She was asked, "You're going to find out this woman loves to live in denial. She loves that space. She'll use it constantly. It's her safe space. She has to deny everything. She has to deny things that she doesn't even need to deny. But she's so entrenched in distancing herself that she doesn't have any other way of doing it but denials." Teresa was asked again when she left the dress barn, and she again quickly replied, "I left at 2:41. That's when I got into my car, at 2:41. I'm trying to be as..." And here, dreamers, she was cut off and told that she was fine. But I think in that moment, Teresa realized that her answers are too specific to not add to the suspicion. And she's trying to explain or justify her responses, but they don't want to stop her because I think these detectives are starting to realize that this is nonsense. So they tell her, "No, you're fine." Then she's next asked, "So you said that Randy called you back." Teresa interrupted and said, "At 3:08. The last time I called him was at 3:08, and he called me right back." This whole next part of Teresa's narrative again reminds me of Pam Hupp and her interview and interrogation. Remember her? Teresa says, "He says he was just really busy on the phone. He was talking to one of our clients about fixing our fence because we have a little dog that likes to jump over the fence. I wish I could remember his name. His last name is Watkins. Um, um," and she paused. Whatever is going on in Teresa's mind, she decided to keep it to herself in that moment. She was asked about how long was the conversation when you spoke to Randy at 3:08. And she said, "Oh, let me think." And she takes a while to pause. And I leave all of these pauses in there because I think it's very telling as to her deception. And she goes, "Oh, it was about 15 minutes. And the reason why I said her answer about the dog jumping over the fence and getting the fence fixed, blah, 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 reminded me of Pam Hupp. Because if you remember in her interrogation, they asked her when she killed Louis Gumpenberger, they asked her about, "Tell us about your day and the lead up to it." She goes, "Well, I got up and I got the dog outside, let him did his business, brought him back in, gave him a treat." It's like, what the fuck, you know? We don't need to hear all of this stuff. It's like I said, it's the detail mountains. Pam Hupp did the same exact thing. Next, I think we come to what is one of Teresa's big contradictions, to me anyway. I'm not really sure if the detectives caught it, but after she said she went to Miranda's school and she sat in the parking lot and waited, the detective asks, "And then your daughter came out? Is that what you said? You're at the school where your daughter's at?" And Teresa replied, and mind you, in the audio, she is talking very fast at this point. This is very well rehearsed, if I'm being honest, but she does contradict herself when she next says, "Yeah, I sat there for a few minutes before she came out, and I wasn't talking to him, Randy," when she just said that she was. "I was talking to some of the students. They know me, and they'll come out and talk to me and stuff, and then she just stopped talking. Personally, I think she's talking to the students to make herself seen. This is alibi stuff here. I picked up my daughter from school from the time that she was 5 until she was 17, and none of her friends ever walked up to my car to chit-chat with me while I was waiting for her. Ever. And I seriously doubt that the students came to chit-chat with her while she was sitting there. Oh, but it just so happens to be on the day that her husband gets murdered, and she needs to be seen somewhere else other than the crime scene, right? Very convenient, Teresa. So, the contradiction, I don't know if you caught it. I might not have been specific on the times, but she said that Miranda gets out of school at 3:15, but she got on the phone with Randy 8 minutes earlier, and she said she had a 15-minute phone conversation with Randy. That would take her time on the phone with him all the way to 3:23. And at the same time, she was parked there at the school for a few minutes waiting for her daughter. But I wasn't talking to him, she said. I was talking to some of the students. They know me, so they'll come out and talk to me and stuff, and you done messed up your story already, lady. She literally is saying that at 3:15, she's talking to no less than 3 people at the same time, possibly even more if she's to be believed at all, simultaneously. She's talking to the students who know her. Randy's on the phone, and Miranda's coming out of school at 3:15. And even if she's juggling all of these conversations that she's having in the school parking lot, what she's doing, like I said, is she's making sure that her whereabouts can be verified during this very critical window of time when Randy is going to be murdered. It wasn't very long after that 3:08 phone call that Randy's life comes to an end. Teresa made sure that everybody saw her. The bank, the chiropractor, the dress barn surveillance cameras, the students at the school. All of these people and entities can corroborate her alibi. When the time comes, she's going to need it. And also, you know that all of these places are within a few minutes' drive of each other, right? Obviously, the chiropractor appointment didn't go as long as it could have. She said she was only there for 15 minutes. She could have gone back to the office and waited for the school's 3:15 dismissal. She literally went to Dress Barn for no reason. She didn't purchase anything. And, well, you know and I know that this is all because she just needed to be seen. She needed to be seen away from the insurance office, which obviously had no surveillance cameras or anything set up, which is why it was the perfect location for Randy's killer to slip in, commit the murder, close the blinds, lock the doors, and make his getaway. Anyway, as Teresa was saying, I sat there for a few minutes before she came out. I wasn't talking to him, but I was talking to some of the students. They know me, so they'll come out and talk to me and stuff, So I sat there with them for a few minutes until my daughter came out, and then I tried to, I don't remember. No, I didn't call him. I just texted him to remind him that we were running by our next alibi spot, J.C. Penney's. Now here, I think Teresa is starting to do some thinking in this interview. She's starting to pause a lot more, and she's starting to roll back on giving up too many details, because this is about the time when I think she started getting information from Pastor David that the murder was done. I believe that Teresa started getting phone calls and voicemails. And such as the one from the pastor telling her not to come to the office by herself. It's like, what an idiot. He knows she's with Miranda, picking her up from school. Why would he tell her or suggest to her to not go to the office by herself? She needed to go by herself. What were her options? To subject her daughter to finding her own father shot to death right along with her? I wouldn't put past Teresa to add that into her alibi, but I think she actually had the ability to stop herself. Teresa Stone is definitely not in the running for Mother of the Year anytime soon, but to an extent, at least she has some boundaries. But yeah, that voicemail that David Love, Pastor David, supposedly left her to go by herself. I mean, what else was she going to do? Take her mom and dad, her daughter? That would have been really strange. A lot of murder conspirators do bring along witnesses to quote unquote discover the bodies with them as a part of the alibi, like I just said. I actually don't think Pastor David thought Teresa would go to the office with anybody else. I believe the plan was for Teresa to discover Randy, on her own by herself. And it was just David's way of saying that the murder was done without saying the murder was done. Teresa contradicted her story here again because now she's got these conversations going, talking to the students, calling Randy 6 times, getting a call back at 3:08. She said she talked to him for 15 minutes, but she's talking to the students and Miranda. And now she's thrown in that she sent Randy a text telling him that her and Miranda are going to go to JCPenney's. And this is all happening in the same 15-20 minute time frame. So Teresa says, no, I didn't call him. She said she called him, but then she changed her mind, probably because she's got too many conversations going on in the same time period. I just texted him to remind him that we were running by JCPenney. Yes, this was after school. This was about 3:30. Miranda was coming out late because of her boyfriend. So after we left Tri-City, that's the name of Miranda's school, Tri-City Christian. After we left Tri-City, I ran to Sonic to get my daughter something to eat, and then we went to JCPenney's. She says JCPenney's so many freaking times. And then I text him. Okay, so Dreamers, shortly after they got to the details about the JCPenney's and which Sonic that she went to, Teresa was asked about how long she was at the JCPenney's, and she joked and laughed. She told a joke and said, longer than I wanted to be. I just had to stop and post a screenshot on social media of Teresa laughing it up with a detective. I put it up a couple weeks ago as I wrote this. Laughing it up with a detective when she made that comment over there about JCPenney's longer than I wanted to be. She laughed. I took a screenshot of that moment and posted it for you guys. So from there, Teresa says the following. We left JCPenney's. Looking at her phone, she interrupted herself because her phone is vibrating during this time. She's getting lots of text messages and notifications because, of course, her husband was just murdered. She interrupted herself and then went back to what she was saying. No, I didn't call him. We left JCPenney's at 4:20. And she's waving her hand around a little like she thinks she's thinking really hard about her alibi and her whereabouts. And she continued, I was supposed to be at the office at 4:30. So on this particular day, when Randy happened to get murdered, Teresa placed herself at about a half dozen different places in that window of time when this murder happened. She was supposed to be back at the office at 4:30, she said. So she and Pastor David gave themselves 3 hours to pull this off. She went to the U.S. Bank, chiropractor, dress barn, Miranda School, Sonic, JCPenney's, home to drop Miranda off, and back to Bank of America. That was a detail she added in later. The Bank of America, that was, one of them is for Farmers Insurance business and one of them is for their personal banking. Randy was murdered on the 31st of March, so it is the end of the month, and people do banking at that time of the month, I guess. I don't know. That was a detail, the Bank of America detail she added in a little bit later. I guess maybe it slipped her mind. Teresa will say, or she did say, that she usually doesn't come back to the office. She says it a lot. I never work nights. I leave at 3 to go pick up Miranda and I'm home for the day. So she'll say it a couple times that she never works late. But on the day of the murder, coincidentally, she has to go back, apparently. She told the detectives that she usually doesn't come back to the office after she leaves to pick Miranda up from school unless they have a lot of work to do, which they apparently did this afternoon. Later on, she's going to say, we had 2 clients coming in, one to make a payment, and one to fix the computer. Those were her 2 appointments. Don't think she needed to come back for that. I wouldn't have. I'll talk about this towards the end more, but this day that she came back to the office was one of the rare days that she apparently had to work late, and it just so happened to be the day that Randy got shot. Somebody had to make that discovery, right? So What Teresa didn't say during this part of the conversation is that after they went to JCPenney's, she did stop at the Bank of America and then took Miranda home and then went back to the office. That's the order of the things that she did. So then she continued. She says, I was supposed to be back at the office by 4:30. She had an appointment at 5. I don't know why she needed to be there at 4:30. At least I told him I'd be back at 4:30 and I didn't make it. Teresa was asked about her purchases at JCPenney's and she said, yeah, we bought some sunglasses. Me and Miranda both got a pair of sunglasses and I bought her a couple of shirts. Teresa was asked whose idea was it to go to JCPenney's, and she put the responsibility of that alibi trip on Miranda, stating, well, my daughter said she needed sunglasses for our trip, and I said, okay, I've got a $10 off coupon, so we'll go to JCPenney's and get you some sunglasses. So that was a lie, because JCPenney's was her idea, not Miranda's. She just said it was Miranda's idea. So we made this plan 2 days ago that we would go because that was the only time that we could go. The only time that we could go was when my husband was going to be murdered in his 3-hour window. So we did. Now, dreamers, I find it hard to believe that this particular afternoon was the only time that she could go. This was a Wednesday afternoon, the day that Randy was killed. They were headed on their vacation the following Thursday, so 8 days later. But yet, she's sitting here saying that this was the only time they could go. What about Saturday and Sunday, when you don't have to be at work and be at school? And if my daughter was like, Mom, I need a pair of sunglasses for our vacation that's 8 days away, and there is a Saturday and Sunday in between, but I have to go right now, sometime between 3:30 and 4:30 on the day that Daddy's going to get murdered. Can you take me, please? I'd be like, no, I just got off of work. I just had to pick your ass up from school, and now I got to go back to work. I'm not taking you to JCPenney right now. That would be my answer. Not Teresa, because she's building her alibi. If she told Randy that she needed to be back at the office at 4:30, or she would be back, or promised him that she would be back, then technically she couldn't go to JCPenney's because she didn't have the time. But she's sitting here saying that this was the only time she could go. But you know what? It's a moot point anyway, because Randy was already dead and Teresa knew it. The detectives next asked what they did after JCPenney's. And if I never have to type the word JCPenney's ever again, I'll be a very happy person. Teresa said, we went home. We drove to home. My dad was there. My parents were home. My parents were there. How convenient yet again. Because our lawn mower quit and my dad is like he can fix anything. So she needed her parents nearby because she was going to need their support with Miranda because she needed to go and handle the discovery of her dead husband. So her parents just happened to be over fixing the lawnmower at the exact same time as their granddaughter's father is getting murdered. Yeah. Well, at least she had enough sense to have somebody important and close by to support Miranda when she would receive the news that her mom was about to drop on her. So what's funny about the next part is that the detectives asked Teresa what her parents' names are, and she says, Bob and Barbara, all chipper and perky. She says their last name, but the video is edited out. But right after that, they ask her to spell it, and she spells it, but nobody edits it out. It's Greenwalt. So Teresa continued. So they were there. My dad was mowing the grass, which I told him not to do. Why? If my dad's over there and he wants to mow my lawn, knock yourself out, right? Speaking of dads, if my dad were alive today, he would be turning 100 years old. How crazy is that? He was born November 20th, 1924. Anyway, so after Teresa said that she told her dad not to mow the lawn, she suddenly goes quiet as the detectives think about their next questions. And finally, Teresa said, "I'm sorry. I was just thinking that I hope they locked up my car because I have my checkbook in my car." Actually, she whispered it. She goes, "I was just thinking that I hope they locked up my car because I have my checkbook in my car." And they tell her that they'll probably lock it up. They always lock up when we're done. But she completely ignored what he just said and kept going. "Because I went home and I took my stuff in, and my daughter, we took all our stuff in, and I was home 10 minutes tops because I just ran all my stuff in, said hi to my mom, refilled my water bottle, and left." Bear in mind, she knows she's going to go back to the office to find Randy dead. She knows this in her mind. Nobody else knows it but her. And she has enough forethought to refill her water bottle for herself. That crazy bitch. Anyway, she continued, "Refilled my water bottle and left. My daughter stayed home because we were going to be working late tonight." Dreamers. Her checkbook. She's so worried about her checkbook. I mean, I guess I wouldn't want to get caught up in any type of bank fraud or identity theft being committed against me while I'm having to go and handle my husband's pesky murder, right? Teresa was asked, "Where did you go from there?" She stated, "Oh, I went to the bank on the square, Bank of America on the square." And mind you, dreamers, all this time, Teresa's waving her hands around. She's super animated, really chipper and perky and cheery. And she continued, "I made a deposit for Farmers Insurance. I left the bank at 4:40. And that's when I texted my husband." And here she picks up her phone to look at the exact time. "I text him. God, I have so many more texts since then. I text Randy at 4:40. So I must have left. Sorry, I must have left the house at 4:40 then. I'm sorry. I just didn't really pay all that much attention to the time." Really? You weren't paying that much attention to the time. Uh, it's been kind of sounding like she's been paying attention to the time right down to the millisecond, but maybe it's just me. Teresa then turned the screen of her phone so that both detectives in the room could see it. And she says, "I said, I'm on my way." And she's showing them the text message to their faces that she said, "I'm on my way at 4:40." And she waved the phone around to make sure that everyone could see that she was accurate about the times that she's sending text messages to a man that she knows is dead. And when she did that, she laughed again. And she said, "And it's not unusual for him to not respond to me," which is another contradiction, since she said earlier that she and Randy text and call each other all the time to let each other know what the other is doing. But I guess this time Randy had a pretty good excuse, being dead and all. But Teresa's trying to play this off like this is any other typical afternoon in the day of the life of, right? So she kept going. Left the house at 4:40, went to the Bank of America on the square. That's where our farmer's account is through. And that's where they sweep our account out every week or every month. That was a business deposit. Teresa was next asked about the earlier deposit at the U.S. Bank, and Teresa laughed and said again, "That's our personal. That was our payroll to pay our bills for tomorrow." I texted Randy and nothing came back. And she was asked where she went next, and she said, "I went straight to the office." The detective next asked, "Okay, so you get to the office. The only car out there is Randy's?" Now, in the first sad tone of voice that we've heard in like a half hour, Teresa replied, "Yes." "And you parked next to his car?" She said, "Always. Always." But in, when I pulled up into the driveway, I noticed the blinds were closed, and that is not normal at all. And she starts to get very quivery voiced and emotional. She was asked, "You get ready to go in, and you notice you have to unlock the door. Now you said, 'Are both locks locked or not?' She replied, 'No, the deadbolt was not locked, just the bottom. When I tried to unlock it, it was easy. I mean, I didn't even have to do anything to unlock it. It's very tough to turn. You almost break the key to unlock the deadbolt.'" Teresa was asked, "What time do you think you arrived at the office?" She replied, "I got to the office right about 10 till, meaning 10 minutes to 5. Maybe a little bit before. Maybe a minute or two before. But it was pretty close to 10 till." Teresa was next asked, "So the last communication you had with Randy was about," and she cut him off and said 3:08. "And he never responded back to that text when you left your house at 4:40. You said you noticed the blinds were closed when you got back. What time does your office usually close?" "We close at 5, but we leave the blinds open until it starts getting dark. And then we will close the blinds, or he will close them. I normally don't work late. Once I pick my daughter up from school, I don't come back unless we really have a lot of business to do." They asked, "And you were working late? What were you working late on?" "Well, we had a computer guy that was going to come to work on my computer because my computer crashed last week. Tony, and I don't remember his number. I don't have his number. It's in Randy's cell phone," and she laughed again. "We were going to work until he showed up. Randy told me that he was supposed to get there right around 6. We were just going to make a list of all the stuff that we were going to have to sell, all the stuff that we were going to have to box up and take with us. We were just about to start because it was getting to be crunch time. That's what we were going to work on." So now the detectives wanted to try to tread a little light getting into what Teresa found when she went into the office. I'm pretty sure they're suspicious at this point, but they're still trying to be decent people and show some tactfulness with this woman who just became a widow. They asked her what she saw when she walked in, and she replied, "All the lights are off. I say, 'Honey, where are you?' And I walked into his office, and I turned on the light. The computer's up. Everything looks fine. I walk into the back room there, and I turn on the light, and he's not back there. The storage room." And here, Teresa will begin the first of what will be lots and lots of fake crying and sobbing. She goes, "And I walked around the corner, and perfectly timed, just right. She literally cued her emotions when she begins to describe going around the corner in the office finding Randy. This is emotion that should have been in place from the very beginning. This is the first sobbing that she's done this whole entire time. If you listen to this initial interview, you would never in a million years think that this woman had just discovered her husband shot to death until she tells you, "I found him shot to death." Teresa, her face scrunched up. She has a very high, pitchy voice. She does some deep breathing and fake crying. There's no tears. And there's an interview on, I think, Deadly Women, where the FBI agent that we'll hear from later on says there was crying, but there were no tears. Very common with the guilty. They're asking her if the light was on. Was the door shut? And Teresa's sobbing into the palm of her hands now, shaking her head no. The detective said, "So you can see him lying on the floor and the light was off?" She nodded yes. "What did you do once you saw him laying there? This is really important." She cried, "I kept calling for him to wake up." "Did you shake him?" "I didn't touch him." Again, in an attempt to be tactful about this, they apologize, but they explain that they need to be as detailed as possible. Like she has been up until this point, right? "Did you see anything? I mean, obviously he was on the ground." And she cries, I saw blood coming out of his ear." Okay, dreamers, the interesting thing when I watched this back to make my notes for this episode, when she said the words, "I saw blood coming out of his ear," Teresa actually makes a gun out of her thumb and index finger and points it directly at her right temple. To me, that's one of the biggest tells in this whole entire interrogation. The blood coming out of his ears as she pantomimes pointing a gun to her temple. It's very telling and actually pretty chilling also. Another interesting exchange is that there's a point around this time that Teresa says, then I walked around and then she pauses for a moment before she says the next words. The detective sitting across from her puts his hand up to his mouth because he's about to cough. He's actually been coughing periodically through this recording, and you probably have heard it. But I'm going to leave these coughs in. I took a lot of the coughing out of the interrogations that I uploaded on Patreon because there is so much of it, and it's not really necessary to the story, and neither is this. But it's all about Teresa's behavior and her demeanor. So watching this detective raise his hand to cover his cough, Teresa's keeping her eyes on him. He coughs, she pauses and allows him to cough, and then she finishes her sentence. And then it just kind of tells me that she's very focused on making sure that they hear everything that she's saying. She wants to make sure that they are very clear on everything that she's going to say and that they are listening to her and believing her at this very critical moment when she, quote unquote, discovers Randy's body. She's not focused on her dead husband. She's focused on her audience, making sure that they're buying in to the Teresa Stone show. So she continued while sobbing, and his eye was really puffy and his skin was really discolored. And I noticed he wasn't breathing, but I didn't want to touch him. I was so scared. Teresa was asked, "What did you do? What did you do to help out? What did you do from there?" She replied, "I went over. I stepped over him." She was interrupted and asked, "Now, one of those heaters was by him too? Was that standing up or did you knock it over getting to the phone?" "No, it was already laying down when I got there. When I walked in the room, it was laying down. At first, I thought he hit his head on it, but then I saw the blood coming out of his ear, and And she stopped herself and began sobbing again. The detective then says, "So you stepped over him," which you can kind of see or hear that it's a very troubling detail for these officers. For anyone, really. I mean, who does that, especially if you have a cell phone that was actually closer to her? I'll tell you where it was a little bit later on. She's going to say, she didn't touch him. She just stepped over him. "Okay," he says, "so you stepped over him and what did you do?" Still sobbing, she replied, "I stepped over him and I grabbed my earpiece and I put it on my ear. And I know you're supposed to dial 911, but I called my parents first and I just told them to come to the office and I hung up and I dialed 911. Okay, so all of that is really weird and very bullshitty. Starting with the stepping over him to grab the earpiece to the office landline, putting it on her ear to call her parents. To me, that is a clear indication that she did not have any concern about helping Randy. She callously, cold-heartedly stepped over him to get to the landline office phone. She didn't even bother to touch Randy to feel for a pulse. Her own husband of almost 20 years didn't want to lay a finger on him. And in calling her parents from that landline, it tells me that she was trying to conceal that specific phone call, not ever thinking that the investigation would ever take detectives into looking at the phone records of the insurance office. Because what she did next, what she said she did next was call 911. But if you remember, and I mentioned it earlier, and the reason why I wrote that is because we talked about this a long time ago when I first told you this story. I think I started this series in September. She did not call 911 immediately after she hung up with her parents. She waited 9 minutes before dialing 911. That there is a significant time gap between those calls, investigators later found out. Not only did Teresa not call 911 right away as soon as she hung up with her parents, she put the earpiece back down on her desk. That's what she said. She picked up her purse and whatever else she had with her. She stepped back over Randy, and eventually, after 9 minutes of doing whatever she was doing in that time, ran out the front door of the office, did drama splatted herself onto the front lawn of the business, and then dialed 911 from her cell phone. Yes, Teresa had her cell phone on her, her regular personal phone, and her cheater, liar, burner phone on fire with her too. She had both of them. She had both of those phones when she made the choice to step over her dead husband's body to use a landline in an effort to secretly call her parents first. And let's not forget that Stone Cold Stupid here also told her parents in her phone call to Randy that he had been shot when she absolutely should not have known that information unless she knew that information in advance. As in, she was aware. She had a hand in it. She knew what was going to go down. And she slipped up badly when she told her parents that Randy was shot. 9 minutes later, when she got on the 911 call, she only indicated that it looked like her husband had fallen down, hit his head, and was bleeding. She never said he was shot to the dispatcher because she remembered then that she shouldn't be knowing that specific detail. It was also in a short period of time that Teresa realized that she was going to be questioned. Her phone was going to be looked at. She needed to get rid of that burner phone right away, as did Pastor David at some point as he was disposing of the weapon and the phone. After weeks and months of a flurry of activity on those burner phones, or later on we're going to start calling them track phones because that's what the detectives called it. Both of those phones all of a sudden went radio silent right after Randy was murdered. That's a conspiracy. A C-O-N-spiracy. After she hung up with her parents and called 911, Teresa was asked, "Where'd you call them at? At your house or their house?" The detective was talking about where her parents were, but she misunderstood, thinking they were asking where in the office she called them from. And she replied, "No, I called them from my phone." And they said, "No, where were they?" And she replied, "Oh, no, I called them at O." And she takes a second to think. And they asked, "You said that they were at your house when you left." "I don't know if I called her cell phone or if I called the home phone. I don't remember." This is where the detectives are going to start in on a little bit more tougher questions. They asked, "Did you call from, you put your earpiece on and you called from your office phone?" "Yes." "I think I called the house, but I don't remember." And here she's still trying to cry and sob. "Who'd you get a hold of?" "My mom." "And what did you tell your mom?" And here Teresa started to stammer, and she said, I just told her, I said, Mom, something's wrong with Randy. I said, he's bleeding and he's not responding. He's not breathing. I need you guys to come to the office now." And I was saying it so fast I had to repeat it several times. And then I hung up and dialed 911. "From the office phone?" And she nodded her head and replied yes. They asked, "Did you stay in the office doing this or did you go outside?" She replied, "No. When I got on the phone with the operator, she told me to get out of the office." So there was an inconsistency because she said she put her earpiece down. So I'm not exactly clear, but she might have called 911 from the office phone, but I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure she called from the cell phone. She told so many lies that we're just really never going to know the straight truth. And we see the fundamental problem here, right? How she told detectives she dialed 911. They said from the office phone, and she replied, yes. This is a huge lie that's easy to prove, but she's wanting to give the easy answers right now in the beginning. She's not afraid. She's clearly not afraid of being exposed or of her lies or getting caught in her lies just yet, because she's still thinking that these guys are believing her as this sobby, slobby, grieving widow. But then she's saying that she was told to get out of the office by the operator. As she stated, she did not stay in the office. Well, she's on her landline. Maybe it's a wireless phone. Maybe she would have been able to run outside with the landline without disrupting her service. But it is not what happened, and the lies will start to get noticed and challenged very soon, and they will continue for a very long time to come. After Teresa said she was told to get out of the office, the detective said, "The dispatchers told you?" "Yes." "So I grabbed my purse. They asked, 'Did you step back over him?' "Yes, I did." The sobbing has now subsided. So stepping over him for a second time, I guess, wasn't as traumatic as the first. When the detective asked her that, he was very matter of fact. He kind of made a motion with his hand, gesturing like a step over an obstacle, like getting in the way of you walking. And you step back over him. I think they just can't get over this fact. And she just matter-of-factly said, "Yes, I did." Absolutely no grief, no emotion on her face anymore. Just like that. "Yes, I did. I grabbed my purse, I stepped over him, and I walked out." Those were her exact words. "Yes, I did. I grabbed my purse, I stepped over him, and I walked out." But later on, witnesses are going to say she ran out the front door, burst out screaming and crying, threw herself on the lawn, and had all this dramatic show and expression of emotion outside. But here she's saying she walked out. Next, she was asked, "Where was your purse? On the desk?" Again, she's very matter of fact when she replied, "Yes, my purse, my drink, my cell phone. I just kind of set it right there on top of my desk." Okay, dreamers, can we chew on this for a moment? I mean, she walks up to her office. She has in her hands her purse, her drink, her cell phone. She at some point has her keys in her hand because she walked up to find the door locked and the blinds closed. So with her hands full of stuff, instead of knocking on the door or kicking it with her foot or yelling out for Randy, she juggles things around. She tries to get her keys, to let herself in. It's not closing time yet. Randy's car is out there. She has said that they keep the doors open until closing time and they keep the blinds open until it gets dark. But she comes before closing time to find the door locked and the blinds closed. I thought about that. And if it were me, if I came back to my place of business that was supposed to still be open from the outside and saw the blinds closed and found the door locked, I think I would go back to my car and call Randy from the outside and be like, "What the F is going on? Why is everything shut down? Where are you?" I wouldn't think he was still inside if he closed up and locked up, but his car is still there, so I'd start calling thinking that he walked someplace nearby for some reason. But no, she had all her stuff in her hands, purse, drink, which she refilled at home, phone, and at some point her keys. She lets herself in. She said she called out for her husband. No response, obviously. She continues to Randy's office, still with everything in her hands. Still no Randy. She goes to the storage room. Everything still in her hands. No Randy. She finally says she comes around the corner, goes into her office, sees Randy on the ground, and casually sets her purse, her drink, and her phone onto the desk. According to her story, she takes a quick look-see at Randy, steps over him, puts on her earpiece, and calls her parents. She claims to have hung up on them and called 911 from the same phone. She's told to get out of the office, picks up her purse, her drink, and cell phone, steps back over Randy, and walks out. And when she is talking about this, there is no emotion in any of it. No crying, not even the fake stuff. After Teresa said, yes, my purse, my drink, my cell phone, I kind of just set it right there on top of my desk. She actually rolled back on that statement, realizing how preposterous this all started to sound. So she took that back and said, well, I walked out and I didn't grab anything. And then she asked me to grab my cell phone or something. So I walked back into the room and grabbed my purse and my cell phone, but I left my water, which contradicts what she just said. She said she grabbed her water. The detectives asked, the dispatcher told you to get your cell phone and purse? Yeah. You can tell in this next pause that hung in the air that these detectives are seeing some massive red flags, as we all are. Did y'all hear what she said? The dispatcher told her to grab her cell phone. There is no person, place, thing, time, way, shape, or form in hell that a dispatcher in 2010 is going to be on the phone with a caller to tell them to get their phone because they're on the phone. The assumption is that the call is coming from a cell phone. Why would the dispatcher tell her to grab her cell phone? The detectives will circle back to this weird detail a little bit later, but yeah, Teresa literally said the dispatcher told her to grab her phone or something and to get out of the office. She said that. She told me to grab my phone or something and get out of the office. Why in the hell? She has the phone. She's on it. She's actively talking to 911. The phone has been grabbed. And don't 911 operators usually ask questions about the victim? Like, do you want to do CPR? I can walk you through it. Is he breathing? Have you checked for a pulse? You know, that sort of stuff. Maybe, just maybe, they think there's some danger, but she didn't tell anybody except her parents that Randy was shot. So, I don't know. This whole entire story that she's made up, it doesn't make any sense at all. None of it makes sense. Next, the detectives ask, so you go back outside, and now you're waiting for the police and your family to arrive. They talked about what she did, who arrived first, that an officer she knew showed up. She knows him from the church, and so they asked her, so he gets there first, and you start telling him something's wrong, and says you kind of break down, and that's when my earpiece fell off. He knocked it off when he put his arm around me. She told them a few moments ago that she set the earpiece down and walked out of the office. So there's another huge inconsistency. They asked her next, and from there, family and other police arrived. Now, you say your car was parked by your husband's car. Who told you to move it? The police officers did. To back it up, put it over here? Yeah, so my dad moved it. My dad moved my car. And from there, we show up. Okay, we're kind of getting backed up a little bit here with some questions that I have, the detective says. One is, why did you step over your husband to get to the phone when you had a cell phone? In the video, you could see that Teresa's face goes from contorted to a look of like a plea of innocence as she says, I don't know. I don't think I was thinking right. He said, that's fine. I mean, it's something that I need to ask. She threw up her hands and said, no, that's fine. You know what I'm thinking right now? I'm thinking maybe it was the burner phone and she didn't want to call from that phone. And maybe she left her regular cell phone in the car because she had been texting with Pastor David and she texts on the burner phone. So it might have been the burner phone and she didn't want to call 911 from that. I just thought of that right now. But anyway, and maybe that was the 9 minutes that she took. Maybe she went to go get her phone out of the car and then made the 911 call from her cell phone. I have no idea. And you know, I'm catching new inconsistencies as I'm going back and reading through my notes and recording this. So I missed some also because there's so many. So she said she wasn't thinking right. After he said, well, it's just something I need to ask, Teresa threw up her hands and said, no, that's fine. I don't know why I did it. And then she laughed as she's saying this. I have no why I did it. I don't know. Ha ha, funny. But I already told you that I think she did that because she wanted to hide the phone calls from her parents. But now I'm thinking that she had the burner phone and couldn't call anybody from it except Pastor David. So they moved on from that line of questioning and they got back to the guns. The guns is a huge issue that they're going to revisit several times over. Teresa was asked, "We talked about this before, but you said we asked you about weapons, okay? What guns do you know of that Randy had either at the office or anywhere?" Without any emotion, back to the everyday, conversational, pitchy, chit-chatty vibe that she would have in a typical conversation with people at the church or her friends just sitting around shooting the shit, right? She says, "The only one that I know of that he has," and she motions with her hands at first, kind of a larger size handgun considering the position in which she's holding her hands, but she quickly shrinks her hands down into size, a considerable amount, like from the size of maybe like a football down to the size of a deck of cards. And she says, "The only one that I know of that he has was this itty bitty little thing," as she shrunk her hands down. They asked, "Was it a black gun?" "That's what you said earlier." "Yes, a little itty bitty thing." And then she gestures with her hands again and throws them up as she laughs and says, "I don't even like touching it." "And where did he keep that?" "He kept it in his office." "Okay, do you know where in his office that he particularly kept it?" "I knew you were going to ask me that, so I rehearsed my answer." No, she didn't say that. She said, "I knew you were going to ask me that." "Well, if you don't know, that's fine." She replied, "I'm pretty positive that he kept it in the drawer at the back of his credenza. There's a small drawer back there, and that's where he usually kept his keys and his gun. Yes, because it's easy to get it if he needs it." This is where I believe Teresa started to lay this foundation of her immense and overwhelming fear of guns. She is going to ride that train till the wheels fall off. She's going to distance herself so far away from the guns. You think that if she had this so much fear of guns, you would think that she would insist that Randy not have him around her at all, to keep him locked up at all times. I mean, and if I had such fear, I would expect my husband to have respect for that. But that doesn't seem to be what's going on here. So either Randy didn't give a shit or Teresa's lying. And I'm going to say probably Teresa's lying. Also, if Teresa were that afraid of guns, don't you think she would want to know exactly where they were at all times? She wouldn't have to sit there and think about where her husband's guns were, where he keeps them, because he has them with him at all times for protection, she says. If you take all the fluff out of her statement and throw together what she first said to answer this question to what she last said, she completely contradicted herself again. She started off by saying, "I knew you were going to ask me that," to, "He kept it in the drawer at the back of his credenza. There's a small drawer back there where he usually keeps his keys and his gun." She went from pretending to have to think about where the gun might be to knowing exactly where he always kept it because it's easy to get to. So next they asked, "And he kept it just because people who come in every so often, strange people, walk up there?" "Yes, he did." "I asked you before this question. There's been no problems with anybody whatsoever? No strange people coming in lately, acting kind of odd or threatening to kill anybody?" "Well, not threatening to kill anybody, but there was this guy that came in, probably," and Peggy can vouch for this too. She knows people need to vouch for everything she says because she's such a freaking liar. Because she was there when he walked in. When Teresa said this, I knew she wasn't being believed, but she kept going. She is committed. I'll give her that. "In fact, he came in once when all three of us were there." And now the emotion's gone again. She's back to her chirpy, chatty self, mind you. She continued, "And then my husband said he came back once when he was there by himself." "Okay, do you know who this guy is?" "No, we've never seen him before." "How long ago was this?" Teresa pretended to think for a moment and replied, The end of February? This was in February." Then the detectives wanted to clarify who Peggy was. Teresa starts to smile here as she gives her answer. She's another lady who works for us in our office 1 day a week. She's smiling because she wants to talk about anything but the crime. So whenever the topic goes on to something that has nothing to do with Randy, the gun, or the shooting, or the pastor, she's all over it. But once you get to those hard topics that she wants to distance herself from, she stammers and stutters and pauses. So anyway, they wanted to clarify who Peggy was, and Teresa smiled and said, she's another lady who works for us in our office 1 day a week. She works every Friday. Well, she has business. Well, she writes. She's licensed too. She writes business for us too. We hired her because she's really good at what she does. It's just, we're helping her out. She's helping us out. The detectives asked more questions about the strange person that Teresa said came into the office twice. But I'm not even going to entertain these answers Teresa's giving about this now because we know it's all distractions and fake conjecture. By this time, we're about 45 minutes into this interview so far. That is all the time it took for these detectives to begin to grow suspicious of Teresa's story. They know that there is no sign of a life or death struggle. They know that money was found on the desk and in Randy's wallet. So they already believe that the killer was someone known to Randy. Someone he would have trusted to not shoot him in the head. There is a lot of conversation about this man that came in twice that skipped over in the audio that I uploaded for you because it's all irrelevant. But the next thing I want to talk to you about, and it's might not be in the version of the interrogation that's in episode 297 that I have for you to listen to, but rather in that 10-hour interrogation video on YouTube. They get back to the gun after discussing this strange man that Teresa described by asking her, okay, let's get back to Randy in the office there. Today, you come in, you find him, you do your thing, and you said he has this one small gun. Okay, we found it. And she goes, you did? Just like that. Really weird response because she acts like it's a surprise, right? But she knew it was there, so why is she acting so surprised? And they said, yeah. Are there any other guns? Teresa, with absoluteness, shook her head really hard, left and right, no. And then she paused and then added, not that I know of. They asked, and I'm saying they because the two detectives are taking turns asking questions. Normally during an interrogation, there will be one detective doing most of the asking and the other one tends to stay quiet, listens, take notes or whatever, and might sometimes interject a question, but this isn't technically an interrogation just yet. This is them getting Teresa's statement, being the last one to see Randy alive, with the exception of his killer, being the one who found him, and she's the first person that they need to talk to. But this interview for her statement is going to eventually morph into an interrogation. After Teresa said, not that I know of, she was asked, okay, does Randy keep any guns at the house or anything you're aware of? Acting like she has to think about this like really super hard, she pauses and says, we have a safe, so I think he has maybe one or two in there. You know, dreamers, it's hard to believe and it's unbelievable, and I don't believe it, nobody does, that this woman who appears to be all up in everybody's business all the time has no idea how many guns her husband has. And the reason for that is because she's going to play up her fear of guns as much as she can and her ignorance of the guns that Randy possesses. And it's all a part of that. It's utter bullshit. Her trying to put as much time, space, distance, and knowledge between herself and whatever guns Randy has. So here, Teresa completely circumvents the fact that Randy was the proud owner of a Glock handgun. She's not even bringing it up. And we know this comes back to bite her in the butt in just another day or two when her house is searched and they find the gun accessories that she forgot to get rid of. Just like she forgot to get rid of the burner cell phone, just like she forgot to get rid of that love letter, just like she forgot that she should not have known that Randy was shot. It is very true that it is difficult to keep your lies straight. And it's because, like they say, the truth never changes. So next, the detectives asked, what about Randy? Does he have a briefcase? Yes, it was at the office. Is it the metal one? Yes. Okay, it was standing by his desk. That's why I'm asking. Yes, I noticed it was there. They asked her, you know his office better than we do? He had an army can right there as you went through the door on the left, a little ammunition army can. Has it always been there? A little decoration? Oh, yes. It's been there for a long time. He just keeps forgetting to bring it home. He has an old buddy friend of his that he's also in the insurance business, and he brought it to him. Randy kind of collects them. Okay, so there's not really any threats, not really anything sticking out except from that guy from February. Then today you come and find this. Gun-wise, he's got a little black gun that we found today. It was loaded. It was a little .380. Any friends or family, anybody else that knows Randy, that would know anybody he's been dealing with that he wouldn't tell you about? She says, no. He tells me pretty much everything. Now, this is another important detail that's going to trip Teresa up yet again. It's another big screw-up contradiction when she says that. Randy pretty much tells me everything. Now, I don't exactly recall at what part of the interview Teresa says that Randy doesn't always tell her everything, but she says it a couple of times. And the reasoning behind it is because he doesn't tell her everything because he doesn't want her to worry. And it seems that she's already made this claim since the time she started talking to these detectives, because he will call her out on it in his next question. But at key points in her story, she gets vague, she denies a lot of things, she claims ignorance around several topics, and then she attempts to distance herself from knowledge of the things going on in and around Randy's day-to-day life. Remember, I told you at the beginning that they call each other all day long to tell each other everything that they're doing. But now that that's become inconvenient, she's going to try to attempt to distance herself from knowledge of the things going on in and around Randy's day-to-day life. So she will say no and literally contradict herself right here. She states, no, Randy doesn't tell me about things because he doesn't want to worry me or scare me. But just 2 seconds ago, she said, Randy pretty much tells me everything. What the hell? She literally just went from, no, he tells me everything, to, quote, no, Randy doesn't tell me about certain things because he doesn't want to worry me or scare me. So next she's asked, well, he's got a gun, but what I'm saying is, if he doesn't want you to worry, and the detective stopped talking and Teresa goes, oh, and you can see it in her face, it gets contorted because she knows she just contradicted herself again by saying that Randy tells her everything, and then literally seconds later says he doesn't tell her everything as to not worry her. But they continued on. I know they're picking up on this stuff, but they want to get as many questions answered as possible here. Are there any friends of his, like guy friends, that he would open up to just to say, does he have a running buddy or anyone you know? And Teresa just shook her head and said, no. Anyone that he would run around with or confide in? No, because we don't do that. He don't go off with his friends. I don't go off with. We just don't do that. We do everything together. I suppose, except when you're screwing the church pastor, I hope. Anyway, she ended up telling them that he doesn't have any friends that he confides in. No. Denied it. After a short pause, and I really think Teresa is reading these detectives' facial expressions, their body language. They're exchanging glances. The vibe in the room very much feels like it's thick with skepticism. And Teresa senses it, because the next thing she says is, I hope this is making sense, guys. I'm sorry if it's not. And they reassure her, no, it's fine. You're fine. You're great. It's very disingenuous how they sound, too. It's pretty funny. You notice that they agreed when she said, I'm sorry if this is not making sense. The first thing one of them said was, it's not, but then followed up with, you're great. She's lying through her teeth this entire time and they know it. And you know what? It's great for their investigation if you ask me. The more lies that Teresa tells, the deeper and deeper she will get mired in her own deceptions. So then they said, we're just trying to put together your knowledge of what we don't know. After that, Teresa kind of further indicates that she has some kind of awareness that this interview is not going well for her. Her body language has tightened up a lot. Her legs are crossed. They've been crossed, but her arms and hands have been gesturing and have been very animated this whole entire time. But now her arms are tightly crossed too. And then she kind of glances at the detectives and she lets out another bit of laughter because that's appropriate in the wake of your husband's murder. And she says, my mom, and I don't mean to sound funny on this either, but my mom called a while ago and said, do we need a lawyer for you? And then she laughed again. And the detective said, yeah, that's people's options, but you know you're free to leave anytime you want. You're not under arrest or anything, and we're trying to do our best to make you comfortable. And Teresa said, well, she shrugged her shoulders and she said, I have nothing to hide. Just like that, she stammered. She stammers all the time because she's a liar. She dialed up the emotions again for a moment, but then cut it off right away. This next part of Teresa's interrogation, you will not, or you're not going to hear the audio clips that I uploaded for you. You won't hear it in there. It's in the 10-hour segment that I've been referencing. But what happens for the next few minutes or so is a whole entire narrative that is nothing but lies spewing from Teresa that she will be forced to fess up to later on when the investigation continues to advance forward to the actual truth or some kind of semblance of the truth as much as they can get from her. She will be called out on all of this in upcoming interviews. So the detective will next say to her, a little over 50 minutes into the conversation now, let's go back to some, let's say, downtime in your guy's life. So we found those notes in Randy's desk drawer. I haven't mentioned these notes yet, and these are different notes than the one they found in the trash can, torn up in the trash can, which will be coming up in a few more minutes. But you will hear all about that in the audio clips that I uploaded. These are different notes. So after he says that, we found these notes in his desk drawer, she replied, the yellow one? And he said, yeah, the notepads. And yeah, pretty much it sounds like you had a friend or something on the side. Or how'd that go? I mean, we don't know anything about that either. His name is Matt. Okay, dreamers, I haven't brought this up yet because it's not relevant to the story per se. I brought it up. I didn't get into the lies that she tried to tell about him in the beginning, but it's another big, huge lie that she gets caught in, but it's really not too relevant to the story. It just goes to show that Teresa is a serial cheater. Like everything else that she lies about, they'll eventually pry the truth out of her. But yeah, this is another man that Teresa messed around with, aside from being in that long-standing affair that she'd been having with Pastor David. This is the man that made Pastor David upset and jealous, so much so that because Teresa was messing around with him, literally cheating on the man that she's cheating on her husband with. The pastor had the nerve to not only get upset about it, he even went and told Randy about it during that St. Patrick's Day conversation that Pastor David and his wife had with Randy and Teresa at their insurance office 2 weeks before Randy was murdered. He brings it up, and I have a theory on his motives as to why he brought it up. So now this is the first iteration of Teresa's ever-changing story about Matt. She says, yeah, he's a client of ours, and he kind of forced himself on me. And so it kind of came out in a conversation, and Randy was not happy. Dreamers, the conversation that she's referring to is the one that I just referenced. This is not a conversation that she was having with Randy. This was an angry confrontation where this guy, Matt, was brought up. The St. Patrick's Day one. But she framed it as having been just between a private conversation between her and her husband, not an argument with the four of them. Teresa continued, Randy was not happy when he found out about him. Okay, he forced himself on you? At the office? No, this was at his house. We were all at his house for a birthday party. So he's like a friend of the family then. And she said, he's a client and he's a good, she's totally stammers. He's a good friend and he called and apologized for what he did and everything's been fine. This is probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Yeah, everything's been fine since then. The detective asked, well, I was just wondering, because this guy, Matt, actually wrote Randy an apology letter. So the detective asked, I was wondering why Randy kept the apology letter for that long. Teresa said, Randy keeps every card, every letter I write to him. They said, yeah, there's a card too. He keeps everything. I keep everything. Was there anything between you and Matt? And Teresa adamantly replied, no, absolutely not. So he just tried to make moves on you and Randy found out about it? Did he do anything specific that was, what anger? I mean, you said he tried to force himself on you. I mean, he was trying to physically touch you in a manner or kiss you. Teresa, and she smiled over at the detective asking the question and said, yeah, he was trying to kiss me. We were at their house looking at the stuff that they had done in the basement. And I just went into the bathroom to look at what all the stuff they did in there. And he came in and he kind of pushed me up against the wall. And I said, get away from me. And that was about all that happened. That was about it. Just a heads up, dreamers, that wasn't about it. There's more to the story. All of this is a lie. So next she was asked, this Matt guy, he's married, I guess? And Teresa said, yes, he's married and he has 2 children. The detective replied, nice. As Teresa continued to smile as she recalled the supposed borderline sexual assault, non-assault, because I don't have to tell you that this is not true. This is not how this happened. They asked, does he live here in town, does he? And she replied in a joking way, he lives far enough away and he could just stay there as far as I'm concerned. As if she wanted to be as far away from this Matt person who supposedly tried to force himself on her, right? You know, this woman wants all the attention. She wants to be the star of her own variety show here. It's all about Teresa. When she said that, the detective chuckled and Teresa was just sitting there soaking it all in. How much these men just want her so bad that they can't control themselves, and she just is eating it up. And the detective continued, I mean, is he here in Independence or is it? And she laughed and said, no, he's in Kansas City. And then she turns her head almost in kind of like shame or embarrassment, looks down at the ground and at the wall. And she says, he's a Kansas City cop. And the detective says, nice. Well, okay. And he's trying to sound a little judgy about this cop behaving in this manner, but I think he knows differently, or he's going to find out differently that things aren't the way that they seem. Things aren't the way that Teresa is making them seem. So she continued with her lies. Teresa threw up her hands in a show of innocence, like palms facing up, and says, I don't want to start any trouble for anybody, so and the hell you don't. She's starting trouble for everybody. She kind of makes this motion with her hands, and she has nothing to do with any kind of drama. So that's, she casts her eyes up to the ceiling. She draws in a deep breath and exhales and goes, oh my goodness. And she sort of cuts off her sentence right there. It's a lie, so there's really not much more detail that she wants to put into this or is able to put into this. She's not ready for this line of questioning. So they ask her, how old is Matt? She replied, oh, he's probably a little older than me, 40. I'm 38. And then she has this big, huge, toothy grin. I think she was waiting for a compliment like, Oh, you look good for your age. Oh, I would have never guessed you were 38. No, she looks 48 if you ask me. That's so cringe. This woman smiling like this just hours after her husband's murder. It's maddening to watch this woman. Keep in mind as you're listening to this audio, or if you have listened to it, just know her husband just got murdered, and this is her demeanor. Happy-go-lucky, all giddy and giggly and smiling and screwing around with all the men in Missouri. She is some piece of work. After she mentioned her age, the detective goes, well, I was going to ask, but, and she giggled again with her stupid little self and says, that's okay. And he said, I was just thinking that he might have been a younger guy or something like that, trying to make a move on you, you know, like he was immature or something. But no. And you know this didn't happen, so well, you'll know later on. I'm not going to spoil it for you right now. After they asked about whether or not he was a younger man, Teresa said no. Him and Randy have talked in the last several days because he does landscaping around our house all the time. So the detectives then asked, so him and Randy do get along after that? Yeah, they're fine. Everything was up in the air. Great. Whatever the hell that means, right? I mean, she literally just told these detectives that this Kansas City police officer tried to force himself on her, and Randy's cool with it and just was going to hire him to do landscaping. Again, this makes no sense. I mean, just me, but if somebody tried to force themselves on me, I don't think my significant other would hire him for anything. Well, all that just goes to show is that it didn't happen. Because if that truly happened, Randy would probably try to get him fired, just like he is going to try to get David Love fired from the church because of his malfeasance. So, yeah, after Teresa said that, oh yeah, they're fine, everything was up in the air, it's great, she's waving her arms around like this is all cool and fine and dandy. And the detectives asked her, so you saw him recently here? He did landscaping? And they seemed surprised, as they should be. And she's like, yep, yeah. We're actually going to have him do some more for us here in the near future. And, but I don't think that's going to happen right now. That's what she said. Yeah, I don't think so either. Because you're going to jail. All right. So all of this is lies, dreamers. Lies upon lies upon lies. This Kansas City police officer, Matt is his first name. His last name is edited out of some parts of this, but they missed it. His name is actually Matt Bruner. You're going to hear it. I was listening to this episode as I was writing this, and I could hear them edit out her saying his last name. But again, like I said, they'll bring it up again. It's not important. Teresa framed this whole thing as being something that this man did against her will. Later on, she's going to admit what happened between them, which was kissing and touching, probably more, but she denied having intercourse with him. She will later admit that she was very much a willing participant, and I believe it happened much more recently than 2 years prior, but it really doesn't matter, like I said, because what is important is when Randy found out, and I do believe he found out when Pastor David and his wife came into the insurance office on St. Patrick's Day, David Love was the one that told him. They had some kind of heated argument that day, which I believe set in motion or even bumped up the urgency to have Randy executed. So they're at this point where Teresa and Randy were going to leave the church. They were going to leave the insurance business and start their own. Pastor David was losing his mistress, and he was so in love and so obsessed with Teresa, Lord knows why, that he went over there to the office and tried to throw a monkey wrench into their plans. And part of that was Pastor David telling Randy about his knowledge regarding this romantic interlude Teresa had with Matt. Pastor David knew about it because Teresa told him. And I think I speculated in the last episode, not the one with the interrogation, but the one before that I thought Teresa would tell him something personal like that for attention and to make him jealous. So 2 weeks before he was murdered, Randy found out about Matt. He probably confronted him about it, and Matt ended up writing him that apology letter that the detectives found in his desk. So, in placing this incident between Matt and Teresa, having been 2 years prior, the investigators automatically assumed the letter came shortly thereafter, because they were wondering why Randy would keep a letter like that for so long, and Teresa explained that away by saying that Randy kept everything, as did she. But I don't know for sure when she got that, but my best guess is that he got the letter sometime between St. Patrick's Day and his murder, because that's the day Randy found out about this incident with Matt, when the pastor told him during that confrontation. It was only 2 weeks. How would he have an apology letter for something that Teresa tried to say happened 2 years ago when Pastor David just told him about it 2 weeks ago? But you know the thing that's really messed up that Teresa did in this whole situation is that she flat out accused this police officer, Matt, of forcing himself on her. She had to say that, especially to Randy, in order to keep up her previous lie that there was never any infidelity on her part whatsoever. Remember, she said that at the opening. They were very much in love, remember? When she was asked if there was anything else, she said never. She even said never. It's one of the very first big denials that she made was ever having an affair. So she could not put herself in the situation with this Matt guy as a willing participant. So in an effort to avoid that, she accused him of assaulting her. What Teresa failed to realize and understand is that these detectives are going to investigate everything that she tells them. And they're going to go and speak to this police officer, and he's going to portray this as very much a mutual encounter. Later on, they will confront Teresa about what the officer told them, and they'll tell her, we know it was consensual, and she will fess up to being willing, and that they kissed and got handsy or whatever. I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to think too much about it either. But I'd assume everything short of actual intercourse. She denied that they had sex, and I believe that part of the story, because if they did have sex, then Matt would have told the detectives about it, and they would have confronted Teresa with more conflicting accounts. But as she's telling it, on this first day of the investigation, just hours after her husband was murdered, she says that Matt forced himself on her almost 2 years prior. Randy found out about it through quote-unquote conversation, when it was actually a heated argument with her other lover. And so in order to continue to distance herself from everything, to not have everything be in such close proximity to the murder, she placed this happening 2 years ago, and that he kept this letter for 2 years, which is actually really unbelievable. It's like I've been saying for weeks about this woman. She has refused to take responsibility or accountability or ownership for any of her actions. Everything that happened to her was the fault of all the men in her life that are so desperately attracted to her. Pastor David won't ever leave her alone. Randy's so in love with her that he's willing to put up with her infidelity. And this Officer Matt, it was all him trying to force himself on her. It's always everybody else. None of this is on her. Everyone else is responsible, because she's just so amazingly alluring to all of these men that they apparently lose all their sense of self-control whenever they're near her somehow. So I think the last thing I'm going to talk about in this episode is the questioning about their families, their extended families. The detectives asked her, so for Randy, where's his family at? And she said, he has a mom and a sister. Here in Missouri? Yes, they were both here today. And she meant at the crime scene. And they said, oh, his poor mom. And Teresa's like, yeah, because his dad passed away in 1993. And they asked him, how did him and his sister and everybody get along? And Teresa said, oh, great. Yeah, because they pretty much rely on my husband to do everything for them. And I mean, how dare his mom and his sister, right? With whom Randy gets along with great, as she just stated. When she said that they relied on him to do everything, I heard a lot of contempt in her voice. This part of the interrogation you won't hear in the audio that I uploaded. It's in the longer version. But seriously, this woman just cannot stop herself. She's about to launch into a tirade about what she really thinks of Randy's family. I mean, the nerve of this woman, right? She goes and has her lover murder her husband. They show up at the scene to be there for comfort and support, and Teresa turns around and talks shit about them a few hours later while she's being questioned down at the police station. That's how freaking ugly this woman is. And I'm not even talking about the outside. This woman is ugly to the core of her being. After Teresa said that they rely on Randy for everything, the detective said, so he took Dad's spot then, huh? She said, yeah, pretty much. And he got kind of... And here, Teresa flashes another huge smile, like a really big toothy smile. And she says, he kind of got like, and she raised the pitch of her voice and said, it's like, hey, leave me alone. I have a family of my own. Not that he was trying to be mean or anything, but his mom can be kind of obnoxious sometimes. So it's like, she still thinks she's his number one girl and that it should be it. The detective interrupted her and asked, is his sister married? Teresa said she was. She's been divorced for probably, 5 or 6 years now. So the detective said, we're looking at his side of the family now, as far as anybody that's intolerable or a problem with him, And she said, no, I don't think I have a problem with anybody in his family, but his family is a bunch of, I'm sorry to say, I'm not a mean person. Yeah, you are. But they're a bunch of losers. Ironic, isn't it, dreamers? To be sitting here and talking shit about Randy's mom, sister, and whatever other family he was survived by, and calling them losers, calling his mother obnoxious. She's about to say half of them have been to jail, yet she's sitting there knowing in the back of her mind what she did, that she conspired to murder her own husband, their son, their brother, their loved one, and they're the losers? I guess in a way they kind of are, because they did lose Randy, and they lost him because of her. And Teresa, honey, you're about to be the loser going to jail. She carried on. Half of them have been to jail several times, is what she told the detectives. Again, it has nothing to do with the case. Absolutely nothing. She knows the truth, but she's just trying to lob grenades to see what will hit, to try to get all the attention off of herself when it comes to this murder. The detective next asked, has any of them popped up lately, like wanting money or anything? And she said, no, they don't bug us for anything because Randy's very successful, but they don't ever bother us. Well, I don't know about that, because she just said they rely on Randy for everything, and he kind of got like, hey, it's like, leave me alone. I have a family of my own. Again, I have to ask, dreamers, which is it? I really wish I had the time to tally up all of the contradictions, but here she goes again saying that his family relies on him for everything, but in the next breath, she says they don't bug us for anything. They don't even bother us. And then she follows that up with, I don't even think they know where we live, which is the way I want it to be. This whole thing disgusts me. She goes and has their son and brother killed and then says that they don't know where she lives, which is how she wants it to be. How much more heartless can this bitch be? And I guess if she's willing to have the father of her own children murdered without a care in the world, then, well, what difference is it to her that Randy's mom lost her son and his sister lost her brother? This woman is just cold. Ice cold. Yeah, stone cold. Next, Teresa was asked, I'm sorry if I sound out of breath. I'm having to pause because my throat is bothering me, but I'm almost done. I just have to cough and drink water and tea and stuff. But I'm almost finished, and I'll probably try to record again in the morning. Teresa was next asked, do you have any brothers and sisters? I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. And they all get along with Randy okay? Oh, yes, absolutely. Her family's a bunch of saints, right? And Randy took care of you? all of a sudden, when they asked her that question, she started getting her air tears again, all the emotions and the fakery. Yes, he did, very much. Did Randy ever carry a gun in that suitcase of his, as far as you know? No, that little one is the only one he ever carried on him, as far as I know. She chuckled a little bit because she does get nervous around questions regarding the gun, as she should, since she knows that Randy's gun was taken from him either by her or Pastor David and used to murder him. And she really kind of contradicted herself again here when she was asked this question, did Randy ever carry a gun in that suitcase? He meant briefcase, but he misspoke. So the contradiction, she was asked, did Randy ever carry a gun in that suitcase of his, as far as you know? Her answer was no. But then she said, that little one is the only one he ever carried on him, as far as I know. Now the thing is, when they asked the question, she automatically went to no. But then she said he did. And it makes you wonder, well, what's the answer? Did he carry a gun in his briefcase? Or did he not carry a gun in his briefcase? I think when they asked that question, she was thinking about the Glock. Let me rephrase the question. Did Randy ever carry that Glock in that suitcase of his, briefcase of his, as far as you know? The answer is no. The little one is the only one he ever carried on him, as far as I know. So she tripped up right there. That was a big, huge mistake on her part, because she knows that Randy carried that Glock in his briefcase. Everybody knew he did. My theory on this is yes, Randy carried the Glock in his briefcase. Maybe it was too big for him to carry on him. So when he got to the office, he put it in the credenza. And when he left work, he put it back in his briefcase. And when he got home, he put it under the bed. I believe the little gun that she's talking about, the .380 that the investigators recovered at the crime scene, was a replacement gun that Teresa put in its place because she knew that it was well-known fact that Randy carried a gun with him at all times. So she had to plant one to take the place of the one she and Pastor David stole from him to kill him with. But Teresa insisted, the little one is the only one he ever carried on him, as far as I know. She qualified her answer with that and kind of left it open-ended in case they find evidence to contradict what she says, because now she's thinking. She's realizing that her stories aren't adding up, so she's leaving it open for her to be able to play the I have no idea card. Well, investigators did have evidence that said otherwise, as the detective begins to go in that direction. He tells her, okay, because we talked to Joe. I don't know who Joe is, but it's someone very familiar to everyone involved, it seems. He went on, we talked to Joe, and Joe says he showed him a gun at the office, and it wasn't a little one. He says it was a Glock. Teresa said, okay, I think he had a bigger one at one time. The detective said, it had a laser sight on it. And Teresa replied, I think he sold that one. I don't think he has that one anymore, because the little one is the only one that I've seen for a very while. Yeah, she said a very while. Her shitty grammar, not mine, okay? You're going to find her grammar is going to get worse as time goes on. The detective asked, how long ago would you think that he sold it? Teresa, she cast her eyes up to the ceiling. She shook her head no and said, oh, good Lord, I have no idea. They asked, do you know who he sold it to? I have no idea. He doesn't tell me when he does stuff like that. Oh, like how she said earlier that we tell each other everything? So stupid. She's acting confused and she gets stumbled up here a little bit. He doesn't tell me when he does stuff like that, she says, and she throws her hands up and says, I don't know anything about guns. The detective said, that's fine. It's probably been a year or so because he replaced it with this little one. Now, dreamers, mind you, Teresa is saying this, and she has no idea that these investigators are going to be able to identify the gun that killed Randy through ballistics testing. He was killed with his very own Glock. And she's sitting there claiming that he sold it a year earlier. She is so stupid to be saying that because it kind of sounds like it may have been pretty recent that this man Joe was shown the gun. He knew details about it. And later on, so will Teresa's own son, Michael, who will say he just saw the gun over winter break. They cleaned it while he was there over the holidays. And that was just 4 months earlier. 4 months before Randy was killed, Michael, her son, tells investigators he saw the gun and he helped his dad clean it. So this lie about Randy selling the gun over a year ago isn't going to fly once these detectives work to corroborate Teresa's story. No, Teresa, Randy did not replace his Glock with that little one. It was you, all you. You replaced it to be a decoy for the Glock, and you and the pastor stole it in order to kill your husband. But no matter, Teresa's committed to these denials, the distancing and the lies, so let's keep watching her bury herself. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is these detectives, they pivot back to Officer Matt, and they ask, other than this Matt guy, nobody else has kind of approached you on the side or had any problems with you and Randy being together? Before he even finished his question, Teresa started shaking her head no. And when he said nobody else, that's how early on the denials start. When he's like in the beginning of his question, she knew where this was going. She nods her head no 9 times as he says this entire sentence. Yeah, I counted. It's a very heavy denial right here. At the end of 9 nods, Teresa says, nope, never, not at all. The head nods do continue past 9, but they slow down, and she starts to look down at the ground as the detective stares at her, probably thinking, this woman must think I'm an idiot if I'm buying any of this bullshit. You can just see that he doesn't believe her, looking at his body language and his tone when he asked the question. So, this is all just a complete surprise? Teresa nodded yes as she tries to conjure up some grief and scrunch up her face, and she says, somebody took my husband's life from me. And his reply to this narcissistic, self-centered statement was, yep. He said yep. When she whined, somebody took my husband's life away from me. Yep. That was his response. So funny. And then he says, that's what we're trying to work on here. We're talking to you first. Teresa leans over and hides her face in her left hand as she tries to cry more air tears. Well, I mean, anybody can cry air tears. The detective humors Teresa. He pushes a roll of toilet paper a little closer to her, just in case she manages to get a bit of moisture to appear.